Great morning, world. This is your boy Dragon coming to you with another Rise Up with Dragon. I want to welcome everybody to the Eye of the Storm, the playing field of your consciousness. As a reminder, this podcast intention is to remove the blindfolds from your programmed mind so that you can gain access to higher levels of consciousness, as well as tap into your true gate potential. We do this how? With our 10-minute straight to the punch deep thought podcast format, our weekly blog called The Dragon's Lair, One from the Vault, and our upcoming online courses and books. I want to welcome everyone to another Rise Up with Dragon.
Great morning, world! Welcome to the Rise Up with Dragon podcast with your host, Dragon!
You know, let's face it, it's a crazy world out there. A lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of people out there in survival mode. I speak a lot on this podcast about how important it is to work on your response system. And that all has to do with your ability to bypass your analytical mind, because our analytical mind is part of that program mind that just reacts to things. And one of the best ways to do that is through the practice of meditation. And that's why the Rise Up with Dragon podcast, as always, is sponsored by Karma Mind.
Get into the float state with Calm Mind meditations and gear.
Awesome. So today I'm going to go over some dragon thoughts just quickly because it's pretty relevant, but today's called the Panoramic Life Review, and it's awesome. Awesome rise up today. So Dragon is back from the pits of hell known as COVID. And I very, very rarely get sick. I mean, it's just my nature to fight disease with health. And most of you know about my health transformation. Lost 80 pounds about 16 years ago now, and just really, really almost obsessively practice healthy habits. And the value of health is measured in your ability to handle adversity with grace. So I have avoided the whole COVID deal. And, I got to be honest with you. I mean, being a old chiropractic mindset person, I've made fun of COVID quite a few times. I mean, not the tragic side of it, but I just kind of thought that I was impervious to it. Like I had some sort of like special gene that prevented it, from happening in my life. Anyway, it took hold of me last week. And the first 4 days, I was just a mess. Real mess. So, big respect to COVID, very strong kung fu, that COVID, took the dragon down to a dark place. It was really, really rough. And here I am. I guess this is like day 9 since the whole fantastic voyage started. And right now I'm feeling much, much better, but I'm experiencing what I guess they call COVID fog. So it's interesting. It's an interesting challenge to even do this podcast right now because my brain is definitely different than it was before. Part of what I think my skill set is as a speaker is I don't have to really think. I'm doing it right now, but I don't really have to think. I just have these ideas come on the fly and I just speak. I can just speak for hours if I wanted to. So anyway, that is being fucked with right now with COVID fog. So who knows what will happen in this rise up, but it's an interesting challenge for me because I don't look at it as something happening to me. I'm wondering how it's happening for me and how I can use it to my advantage and thus your advantage. So let's talk about the Panoramic Life Review. So as always, and this one's pretty deep, I just recently become super fascinated with this idea a little bit of darkness here. I guess this is probably from, those first 4 days in COVID. I just recently became really interested and fascinated in this idea of near-death experiences, and how people describe this mysterious, non-real-time, cloud-based place that they went. So here's what I mean by that. When somebody says that they had a near-death experience, it's like there's real-time life, and then there's this concept of like afterlife death. Near-death experiences, they don't really achieve that other place. They kind of go into this like almost purgatory place. That's why I call it a cloud-based place that they went. So what's fascinating to me is this realm, this place that they go to for this near-death experience, as if it's like a show. This realm hypothetically exists outside what I call the rendered real-time world. And what I mean by rendered, it's like I always wonder if what I'm looking at has just been rendered for my view. I always wonder if like what's behind this wall or what I can't see, I always wondered if it's even rendered. It's interesting. Excuse the cough, but that's part of the deal right now. So, it's fascinating to me because this hypothetically, this place exists outside the rendered world that we perceive each day. So in a video game, and I had this great interview with Rizwan Burke, and I'll talk about that. In a video game, such a place exists outside the game. I watch my daughter play video games. It's really fascinating to watch your kids play video games because a lot of shit is going on that just is really, really fascinating to contemplate. But such a place in a video game exists outside the game in sort of a cloud-based area that's not in the game, but it's a place where she like stores her weapons, her elixirs, and her potions, as well as keeps track and records her journey as she goes. Very, very analogous to life. Like I was watching her play a game the other day. I don't know what it's called, but basically she clicks a button and she can like go into like her backpack where she's holding all of this stuff, which doesn't make any sense how it all fits in her backpack, right? Because it's way more than the backpack, but that's the concept. So I always ask her, I go, where is that? Like, where is that place that you're storing all that stuff? And, her interpretation is I just click the button and it happens, right? So I want to know where that place is, because I think that's kind of similar to where the near-death experience concept is. Following this? So there is some correlation between such a place and the explanations incredibly in various religions where they depict that there are angels, right? Where do angels live? Do angels live amongst us, or do they live in this other kind of a place? But there's angels supposedly keeping track of things like deeds and karma, which will be used at your time of judgment when you're going to either get a pass into heaven or be damned to hell. Pretty scary shit. What's interesting about karma and that concept, of being like evaluated for karma. A lot of religions believe that our purpose here on this planet is to correct bad karma from another life. A lot of people believe that we keep coming back in a different form to try to clean up our mess from another life. And if you do clean it up, then you actually go to heaven or something like that. But if you don't, you keep coming back in a different form trying to do it. And I think I heard somebody say the worst form that we could ever come back in, which sometimes maybe is a punishment, would be that of a worm, right? Because you have a very short life, and sometimes you dry out going across a road, and that's your attempt at trying to clean up your karma. Anyway, that's another story. So it's pretty scary stuff to look at this idea of either getting a pass into the pearly gates or be damned into hell. So not so much scary in practice as much as the thought that someone thought of that stuff, right? So that's the other interesting thing about pearly gates and hell and stuff. Those are man-made concepts, right? So who thought of that? Like, what were they on when they thought that? I want to talk to that. I want to party with that. So while reading this book, this amazing book, and you're gonna well, actually, by the time you hear this in the podcast format, you will have already heard the interview with Rizwan Virk. But he wrote a book called The Simulation Hypothesis. Rizwan Virk, amazing interview. You're going to love it. I came across this interesting concept called the Panoramic Life Review. And it was referenced in a book written by a man named I think it's called Danlin Brinkley, who had been struck by lightning. So he wrote a book, a story about being struck by lightning, and he had what we were referring to as a near-death experience. And he referenced seeing all of the events in his life in review. So that's what's another thing that's interesting about near-death experiences is it only happens in a split second, but people that have them claim that all this stuff happens. So, Mr. Brinkley said that he basically, experienced all of his life events in review in a snap. I have a chapter in my book called Snap that refers to this stuff. Really, really interesting. So not only did he goes on to explain, not only did he revisit all of the life experiences, but he also claimed in this short period of time to have seen each of them through the eyes of everyone else other than him involved. Imagine that. So the book was called Saved by the Light, if you want to read it. It's a fantastic book. I love this idea to consciously look back at your past, at different events, and doing a panoramic life review without the need of being struck by lightning, of course. But it reminds me of a chapter in my book that I reference all the time called Life is a Line. It's going to be one of your favorite chapters. Life is a Line, where we learn to review past happenings. We're always taught to forget about the past, but I spoke on another podcast about retrocausality. There's a lot of value in going back and reviewing past happenings and reassessing what happened in those happenings, where you were at that time, and why did where you were in your current state cause you to perceive and receive the event in the way that you did. This is really, really cool. The value of going back and doing a panoramic life review is going back with your current state of consciousness. You have evolved into a new version of yourself. If you take that new version of yourself and your new level of consciousness and go back and assess a happening, you'll do it like this guy that wrote this book, right? You're more awake now. You're more conscious. You have the ability to go back and question what happened from different perspectives. I call this in my book holographic vision, the ability to not just look at it with your knee-jerk programmed mindset, right? Your analytical mind, but look at it with your new awakened form and say, wow, there's a lot of other things that were going on that might have changed the way I looked at it. So to reevaluate it from a new perspective, both yours and, as he said, the others involved, and there's empathy involved in that. I love, whenever I come across a situation, I love to slow it down, right? I always slow it down, cognitive distancing. And that gives me the ability to have more logic and rationale in my decision-making. But I also like to take a walk around it. And that's what holographic vision is. That's part of the interface response system, where I take a look and I wonder, like, let's say somebody did something and that's the thing I'm looking at. I like to look at it through their eyes as well. Very often you find out it has nothing to do with you. It's not in your control and all that stuff. And it just prevents you from, creating a perception that sticks with you and, turns into a concept later on. And like I said, thus grab onto a different perspective, right? Seeing it through different eyes, and potentially learn to let go of a potential burden. Maybe you have a burden that you're carrying today, but if you go back, you can cleanse it. You can, etch a sketch it and get rid of that potential burden, or maybe even grab onto a life lesson and become clear and empowered by it and actually grow into a new version of yourself here in the present. Either way, I wanted to share this idea of the panoramic life review now so that you could embark on it and gain from it before you die and you go to that judgment state at the pearly gates, right? I want you to go into that prepared. I want you to go into that with a clear mind rather than a jaded mind. So in other words, make use of this and potentially level up today. So you're different now, right? That's what's interesting. You now have the ability to see things differently. Yes, the past is the past, but through different eyes of compassion, empathy, and understanding, perhaps you can change the past. This is retrocausality, right? Perhaps you can change the past and instantly, therefore, change the present and therefore the future. So, for all of you deep thinkers that follow the Rise Up with Dragon, I love and appreciate you all. I love your feedback. I was recently at a big event in Atlanta, which is where I got COVID, the hashtag super spreader. And a lot of people were coming up saying, man, I love your podcast and I listen to this and I listen to that. And we get into these deep thoughts. Man, I have so much respect for Rise Up with Dragon listeners because you are the kind of people that don't just assume that what it is you've been taught to assume is not necessarily all there is. Remember, whatever it is that you're consuming is causing what you're assuming. So if you control what you consume, you will control what you assume. I love and appreciate you all. Have an amazing day, and it's good to be back.